Hi, we're having a conversation with Dr. Leonard Liggio. He is the Executive Vice President of the Atlas Foundation. And Dr. Liggio, being you an expert on legal history, what is it that we can learn from history on these times of trial?
Well, several times in recent years, historians have been looking back to the 16th century and the crisis of the 16th century, which started with the discovery of America. That created advantages and disadvantages, which were the same thing, which was wealth. The wealth of America was an advantage or a disadvantage. And for Castile, it was a temporary advantage and a long-term disadvantage because it gave the illusion of much more wealth than actually it had. And so it was spending money all over Europe for military activities because Charles V had become Holy Roman Emperor, who was King of Castile, of Aragon, of two Sicilies, and engaged in military activity all over Europe, which never ended. There was one more battle and one more battle, and the cost was terrific. At that time, for 100 years, the Castilian infantry was the best in Europe, and always very successful, but not complete. And so the battles went on, and the paying of the soldiers went on, and then his son became King Philip II, and he had 5 bankruptcies during his reign, which was a long 50-year reign to have that number of bankruptcies. Because the belief, the silver from Mexico and from Peru was pay for everything, but it couldn't. They didn't have a sense of economics. And this created an inflation in Europe. It created a lot of disadvantages, but the one that suffered the most was Spain from this great wealth. And so the question is, everything has to be managed well. And therefore, it's exactly in this period of the late 16th century in Castile that the modern economics developed. The priests at the University of Salamanca began to look at what was happening and saying, the king is not doing the right thing. In fact, some of these priests were put in prison by Philip II because he said, you're not allowed to say I'm wrong, I am the king. And they said, well, the king is under God, not above God and not above reason. And so it's the school of Salamanca that begins modern economics, that understands the prices and understands the development of why wealth is good, and wealth can be a challenge if it's not well handled, especially if the administration does not budget well, does not think in terms of the long run, and especially trying to solve it in addition by new taxes. And so the priests at the school of Salamanca said, no, you can't keep having more taxes. That's ruining the people. You're ruining the peasants. You're ruining the producers, the artisans, the manufacturers by these taxes. And the result was that Spain didn't learn and continued to decline, even though it had more wealth than any other country. But we do have from these great writers, like Francisco Suarez, for example, or Juan de Mariana, that present us with the founding of economics. So we owe to this crisis modern economic analysis by the school of Salamanca.
And all these ideas are being challenged today.
Yes, yes.
And we can relate to that in the context of the financial crisis, of course, but also with countries that have great wealth with oil, for example. Oil is wealth, but it also carries
exactly
same problems, isn't it?
Exactly, because it's a world product. It is like the gold, the silver in Mexico was there. Once discovered, it was then mined, exported, but there's no real inventiveness involved in this. It's there, and you extract it, but you don't. There's no growth. There's no improvement in the mental situation for the long term, and so these countries are in a similar situation as under Philip II.
And you are a legal historian, and in the context of a financial crisis, people think economy, and economics, but the legal system. What is the role of the legal system, which is very important,
well,
I presume?
But even more fundamental is the moral system. And of course, the people at the School of Salamanca started with the moral questions and analyzed what was happening with the government from a moral point of view and a legal point of view. And it's so exactly, if you go to the United Nations in New York City, in front of the United Nations is a statue of Francisco de Vitoria. Francisco de Vitoria is the founder of the School of Salamanca, and because he's the founder of international law, and so he's world recognized as the person who gave us a sense that there has to be a world legal principles. And so, and then the others, Suarez and others, similarly were writing on that. So people are not, they go to New York and they go on at the end of 6th Avenue in front of Central Park is statues of Bolivar and San Martin, but no one is going to the UN to look at the statue of Francisco de Vitoria, who is maybe more important.
Well, at least the foundations.
The foundations for legal analysis.
And can you name what are the important questions to make in terms of the moral system and the legal system in this context?
Well, we need to be conscious and clear what is and is not moral, what is not just. And there's a lot of confusion. People often go around like chickens with their heads cut off. And oh, this is just, this is not just. When we have standards, we have 2,000 years of philosophical analysis to decide what is just and not just what some politician in the legislature says, this is unjust, I'm going to pass a law. Maybe it's just, maybe it's not. It's not him to decide, it's the more experts in ethics. So we have people trying to seize other people's money, and we see them then transferring it to other people. The politicians are all playing a game, and we need to be much more clear of ethical principles, not let them just go off like rockets into the sky.
Like rockets. Thank you, Dr. Liggio, for sharing these ideas with us, and thank you very much.